Welcome. Hello.
To the You Are Inevitable podcast, where we take a deep dive and tap into your inner resources. You're here with me, Kathleen Seeley, and Natalie Alexia. We are two very seasoned coaches. Together, we're going to be engaging in thought-provoking discussion, hopefully disruptive to how you see the world. Certainly, we generally disrupt each other's thinking to hopefully land somewhere deeper than when you arrived. We bring you can trust us, 6 decades of combined experience, wisdom, spiritual acumen, academic rigor, and really just we love to have fun. And we do like to have these disruptive conversations just to see what you're thinking, what comes from us. We do not prepare in advance for these. So get ready. It's unscripted. It could be disruptive. And we hope to sort of tickle your mind and leave you with a renewed sense of purpose. And remember, you are the architect of your own life. You are the architect of your own life. And with the right tools, the right mindset, and the courage to explore your thinking, you will find that you are inevitable. This is the You Are Inevitable podcast. If you're watching the recording later, it would be great if you would leave us a review. It helps us get the word out with this podcast. This is relatively new. We formalized it last round, and here we go. Today, Natalie, we're talking about purpose.
I'm excited. We're talking about purpose.
Yeah, what is it? Who cares? Is it just another thing I have? Hi, everybody. Welcome. So glad you're here. I'm just looking at the chat a little bit. Welcome. It's always we always really do appreciate you showing up and engaging in the conversation. So when we talk about purpose, it's really the underlying reason sort of behind our existence. And it gives meaning and direction in our lives theoretically. And we would argue that your purpose can change given where you are developmentally, what the focus is on your life and what's motivating you. It does provide a sense of direction. I also see purpose as really an anchoring, much like values, but a little bit sort of rooted more deeply. I often call it core motivation. The world, purpose would be synonymous to that. You can chime into that if you like, Natalie. And your purpose can vary from person to person. That's what makes the world a beautiful, delicious, diverse place. If we all wanted the same thing or wanted to do the same thing, only one thing would get done. That's what I'm thinking. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. I love what you said. I'm excited to dig into this with you and see where we go. I very much resonate with the idea that purpose changes as we evolve, maybe in consciousness, maybe as we evolve developmentally, or even with age, and depending on the external circumstances, what's present in our life in any given moment. So yeah, I'm just excited to dive in with you.
I had this, me too. I had this I had my birthday a couple of weeks. Last podcast was on my birthday. And then there's been some sort of major life events in my neighborhood that really actually make this a really timely topic. Because when actually my neighbor's mother died suddenly in her house, and the rest of the story doesn't need to be shared, but her mom was close to my age. And of course it was a surprise and a shock. But I found myself shocked and all that, and sad and all those things that happened, but also this thinking about, really the meaning of being here and really reconnecting with what's super important to me and kind of the impact I'd like to have in the world, because we just never know. It sounds kind of like cliche, but for sure we never know. So here's the thing about purpose. Natalie, I've been in the room with thousands of people who spend time identifying their life purpose and taken through this guided visualization. And generally speaking, people open this box, and inside the box is a key, a diamond, a heart. Okay, that's great. And what's that mean? It's hardly because the guided visualization says you might find a key, you might find a diamond, you might find art. But anyway, there's a lot of pressure, I think, to have this clarity of purpose. And I think, and it sometimes for some people who say, I just didn't get anything. And that I was one of those people who, when I did this life purpose exercise, I saw a penguin. All right. So I don't know, even my subconscious has a difficult time taking sometimes this woo woo stuff very seriously, although I think the woo woo stuff is very important. It's funny. What we're here to talk about is this sort of pressure, maybe, on having purpose. I just made that up. And also, it could change. And as Natalie said, it could be developmental, it could be what's happening around you. And figuring out, really, as many of you have heard me talk about before, is that form and function piece. What is the function of purpose? And why does it matter? So, Natalie, I'm gonna throw the ball in your court.
Well, I'm going to start by saying, just because you shared yours, I too have done, Kathleen's talking about a closed eye visualization that we both did with a mentor of ours. Many of you may know him, Jack Canfield. And I got a feather in my box. And the message I got with it was enjoying the lightness of life. I have to say, I have always kind of carried that with me. I like it, this, not taking things too seriously. It definitely resonates with me. But I'm curious to know, Kathleen, like, how has your understanding of purpose evolved over the course of your life?
Well, I was going to ask you first. No. So, I just actually want to go back to the feather for a second, because you actually gave me a feather as a gift one time. I still have it. But the penguin, I was like, a penguin? What is that all about? Like, seriously, a penguin? And Dr. Deb Sandella, who's like amazing mentor and friend of mine, said, a penguin, that's a deep significance. They're very committed. They love their family. There are all these wonderful things about penguins. And then my good friend Barnett Bain, who's just hysterical and cracks me up, he's like, a penguin? That's awesome. You're always dressed for the party. So purpose, I wonder, I'm not sure of the evolution over time for me. I can say that the sort of my core, my deeply driving motivation, or my core motivation, or my purpose, I think has always been something to do with people feeling included, welcome, loved, and valued in some way. Although I can see that now at 59, looking back, I don't know as the expression of that was always useful to other people or helpful, or and I can see how my sort of the way I moved to my purpose, or what I thought might be purpose, has changed over time, in a sense of, from this grinding to survive than to succeed. And now this shift in leaving legacy. I feel my purpose very much lies in the quote, you never touch someone so lightly you do not leave a trace. So leaving something behind. I think I always wanted people to feel better after being around me, but I can't say that I've always had that impact, to be quite honest. So
yeah, I'm curious, actually. I'm curious in the chat. Yeah, I think you and I are thinking the same thing. From those of you who are here, who feels like super clear on their purpose, knows exactly what it is, who's like questioning their purpose, and maybe who hasn't even given it much thought, I would love to hear in the chat where everyone is at. Or even if you feel pressure, I would love to know if you feel pressure around a revolving door. I definitely would say my understanding of purpose has evolved over time. So when I was younger, I have always been very driven. I would identify with being a very driven person. And when I was younger, I really felt like my purpose was to be successful and make lots of money, essentially. And as I reflect on it, I didn't know at the time, but as I reflect on it now, I chose to have my daughter when I was 21. And at that time, I internally made up a story that what that meant was that everyone around me thought that my life was going to be a failure. I don't believe that's true, because actually everyone around me is very lovely and quite supportive. But in my head, that was the story I had made up. So I was determined to prove these imaginary people wrong. And my fear of not being a success at that time in my life, that I determined by things like my kids being able to go to private school, living in a big house, driving nice cars, those types of things, was really driven by the motivator, if you like, for my purpose was fear of being a failure. But what I have learned to understand about your purpose being motivated by fear is that it's not really sustainable, and it does get quite tiring.
Yeah. So true. So true. Yeah. But, kind of a sidebar thought that came up when you're talking about the fear is in, we as a team met yesterday to kind of re-examine our vision and kind of collectively agree on how are we feeling right now, what's important to us, what is our vision, our purpose, our core motivation of the company. And it makes me think about other companies we work with and how a lot of the culture is driven by fear. And I wonder if those layers could be peeled off and really the driving force of it. Say the visions are often very aspirational and beautiful and utopian, but the energetic that's driving it is the fear, and that is what's unsustainable. I think you're saying, like, you probably have always wanted things to show your worth, or that you are of value, that you are a contributor, or you're important, or whatever that is. But I suspect there's always been a part of you that has wanted to leave the world or people around you just a little better.
Yeah, I would definitely resonate with that. And when you said it, yeah, I mean, 100%. I always have wanted to leave people better than I found them. And it's interesting what you say about fear and this kind of conversation around developmental. My 24-year-old brother was here last week, and we were having a conversation, and he's sort of making his way in the world, and he was talking about wanting to get uncomfortable. And we talked a little bit about this motivator of wanting to have a purpose being driven by fear. And he sort of said to me, but I'm just so afraid. If I don't feel afraid, I won't do anything.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Like, I love that you shared that, because it makes me think, what if there's nothing to be done? And maybe in the not doing, the next sort of step emerges. We've talked about this when we talk about coaching and clarity and all those things. I think purpose really is the energetic, if we're to look at this, the energetic that's driving the doing, and where we are developmentally, or the pressures we are experiencing, how we're experiencing the pressure in our life, sort of becomes reflective in the behavior of how we pursue it. And if it's fear driven, or we're able to release a little bit of that fear and hold, I guess, our next step in suspended animation. But what if there's nothing to be done? I know that when I can get really quiet and feel ease in myself, something new emerges. And I feel like, we've, as a company, have made a huge change in the work that we're doing. And it's feeling, once letting the fear go of the change, I have felt more sort of abundance or flow, or ideas, innovation coming in the more we sort of take a beat a little bit. I'm pretty sure my purpose is to be an advocate. Yeah, Janice, I know that about you. But there was something that flipped through that chat that I might have missed it. Weird. I thought there was another comment.
I think someone wrote, I don't know where it went, but I saw a comment that said, what's more powerful? I don't know if that was the right adjective.
Purpose, vision. Yeah.
Purpose or vision.
Oh, gosh, this is really a good thought. Like purpose or vision, which pulls more? I see our purpose or core motivation, if we look at an inverted triangle at the very foundation, this thing inside of us that we're meant to discover, whatever that is. It might take a lifetime. It might take till you're 2 years old. Who knows? But that, this is why I'm here. And then on top of that, to me, is our values. Our values are those energetic containers. They anchor us. They remind us how to reconnect to sort of the higher vision, so to speak. Then our goals we can set as sort of practical touch points. Although how we feel about goals, but they're practical touch points to get us closer to our vision. So I think there's a thread we can pull through it all. I think the vision pulls us forward, and quite potentially our purpose maybe holds us steady or reminds us the reason we want that vision. I don't know. That's my thought. I was reading. I know you'll reference the Course in Miracles, and as I've mentioned, I'm in the Course in Miracles for Dummies. Pam Grout suggests that our purpose is really to be happy, and happiness and function are really the same thing. And I think we endeavor to be happy. And then I would go off on this thought about happiness. But anyway, yeah, I think that's a good question, Kathy. What do you think?
I would agree with you, although I feel for me personally, to me, purpose somewhat just feels like knowing who I am. It is kind of how I would describe it in my own individual experience. Like, Kathleen, when you said, I always wanted to leave people better than I found them, I would agree with that. And also, I have always felt compelled to make a difference. That's something that comes up for me. And it has been with me for as long as I can remember. I was the kid in elementary school that other kids used to come to help them, figure out their arguments. And my family, for the longest time, I would be the go-to person that whenever there was some kind of challenge or conflict happening, like, people would call me to try and help them figure it out. And I've always had this passion for making a difference. And so I also think I love, for me, the flexibility that I find in that knowledge of myself, which is sometimes making a difference to me can mean spending extra time with one of my kids.
Yeah.
That's true. And also sometimes making a difference for me can mean resting instead of working. And sometimes making a difference for me can mean sitting down with you and our team yesterday and coming up with a vision that we don't even know if is achievable to impact leadership on a global scale. But I find versatility, I guess, in that overarching theme.
What I'm thinking about when you say that is, when we say your purpose, we suggest your purpose could change over time. I wonder if it's really how you manifest it, what you see it, because making a difference when I was like 30 is different than making a difference at 59. And that's where I think the developmental stages come in, and allowing ourselves the grace to accept where we are in whatever it is, but also with others too, right? Extending that grace. Because I think I had this notion at one point in my life, I'd be this big famous influencer, people would follow me, blah, blah, blah. I've said that before. But what's true is we're all influencers, and we touch people every day in our lives. And we can, if we're really conscious and mindful of how we do that. And if your purpose is to make a difference, it can be in a small way of, spending time with one of your children, or like me, just being completely the kids next door anytime, just come over. And I just feel so grateful that they do. And they feel like it's a safe place. That's making a difference. Some people, when they're asked about their purpose, things like, okay, making a difference, personal growth and fulfillment, relationships and connection, the spiritual or transcendent aspirations. Like, there's lots of different themes that show up in purpose. And if you haven't ever explored it, I think that's okay too. I think there's this just permission to be where we are would be so delightful, and not needing another sort of structure or system that our next step is dependent upon, and being more present to the moment and listening to what might show up. Because Natalie, you've worked with lots of people, sort of more in the spiritual guidance part of ourselves. But what would you say to someone who feels they're lacking purpose, or are unclear on their purpose?
I mean, it sounds maybe a little bit trite, but I would say, like, joy is your GPS. That's, it is just, I believe that when we are feeling alive, feeling joy in that kind of self-expression of something that brings us joy and fulfillment, we are living in purpose. And I would also, I know you referenced A Course in Miracles earlier, but I would also agree that ultimately, happiness is an interesting word, because, we can kind of dissect any word, but peace, fulfillment, joy, I find is underneath all of the other things, underneath all of the doing in the outside world, and what we want to achieve, and the goals and the vision and the strategy, is ultimately, I said before, I feel like when I was younger, my purpose was very much motivated by fear. And I would say my purpose now, I feel, is very much motivated, making a difference is motivated through the desire for peace and fulfillment in my life. Those three things kind of juggle around in some kind of balancing act. So I would say, if someone is unclear about their purpose, or they're wondering, look to when you feel most alive.
Yeah, that's even when I used to, back in the day, when I used to teach the passion test all the time, it was like, I don't know what my passions are. It's such a big word, as is purpose. It's like, when was the last time you felt like you lost track of time, or you felt so connected to yourself that my thing is like, I don't have to pee and I'm not hungry. I always know I'm like in the zone when neither of those things are occurring to me. And I also, I think, to give each other and ourselves and whoever we talk to, and there's lots of people on the call, I recognize your first name, so there's lots of coaches and trainers on this call, is that allowing the people we work with and ourselves the space to just not have clarity in the moment, to find it through silence and easing up on the gas pedal. And I came across this, I'm in another class, as you know, I'm always learning. So I'm in another course for a year. And I want to share something that the teacher shared that to me is apropos for this conversation, is about staying in flow and present to the moment. And the river channels water from one place to the next. Let the river speak rather than telling it where to go. And I think the only way to allow the river to speak is to stop trying to drive it. And I think that's where fear comes in. The fear of not having enough, the fear of not being loved enough, the fear of not being enough. Those fears drive us. And if we're able to see them as, Byron Katie, I love her example of walking through the forest and this beautiful day, enjoying it, looking down, you see a snake. So you're, oh my gosh, heart's pounding. You're afraid of a snake. And then you look closer and you see it's a piece of rope. And you can look at that piece of rope for 10,000 years and never again make it a snake. So I think it's like that with our fears. That fear driving purpose is, in order to be enough, to be loved enough, to have enough, I need to have fear on my shoulder. What if, I fall behind, or they see me for who I really am. Well, I hope so. I mean, sidebar. I hope people see me for who I really am. I need them to see me because I can't sometimes see it. But anyway, sidebar, my brain, it's all over the place. But really just allowing ourselves to flow in that river of inquiry without needing an answer at the end of the inquiry. Just like yesterday, it was sort of like we had a really great time talking about vision, which is important for a company. And then we kind of eased up and talked about other things. And we came back to it and it became more clear. It's sort of like just letting things flow is releasing kind of that fear, I think, maybe. I don't know. What's anyone thinking? I'm going to let you talk you can talk. I'm just going to see what's going on out there in chat land.
I think I was just going to say, I think that where I have seen in the past people get tripped up is, what you talked about at the beginning of this, that the expression of purpose varies throughout our life. And I think that we can become very attached to the expression of our purpose being a certain thing. So, for example, let's take my example of making a difference. I could come to the awareness that my purpose is making a difference, and I could become very attached to a story that in order to make a difference, I need to become a coach, and I have to have a coaching practice where I'm coaching at least 20 clients every month. And then I need to get on stages and I have to speak in front of at least 10,000 people, and I have to have a presence, and I have to influence change at some level to make a difference. I think it can be frustrating for us when we become attached to and caught up in the expression of our purpose. My example is I had 2 years because I agree with you. I think to some extent it's for me, I see it on reflection, not in the moment, but as I reflect through my life, I see that being a pretty consistent theme. And I had 2 years where my oldest daughter was really, really struggling with her mental health, and to the point where there were significant months and periods of time where I just couldn't leave her by herself. And my purpose, the expression of my purpose in that moment felt like keeping my daughter alive. And it was still making a difference. But and in that moment, it was completely motivated by fear, which is something else we've talked about, because I was in, for a long time, a perpetual state of, I would describe it as terror, that this situation would end in the worst imaginable scenario for me and my family. And so I was being driven by fear in survival mode, and the expression of my purpose was keeping my daughter alive. But really still, if I allow myself to be less attached to what the expression looks like, I can see myself living it, whether I'm in survival mode or whether I'm buying a coffee and being nice and inquisitive to the person who might be having a bad day, or I'm coming up with a business strategy, or I'm coaching a client.
Yeah, that's the form and function conversation. Like, we can get hooked into form. And I think getting hooked into form does come from fear, because the form we can imagine, the expression of our purpose, can only come from our current level of consciousness. Like that, all we can think of is what we can think of in the moment of where we are in our development. And if we get too attached to the form, we might miss out on sort of a broader expression of the purpose, or the the passion, whatever word one wants to use, the motivation. And so that's where I think that's where fear comes in. It has to be this. I've been really noticing myself. I was on in my class this morning. It was 2.5 hours, and we had to coach each other, or we didn't have to coach each other. We're in a triad where one person coached, one observed, one was coached. And generally speaking, I would take on the coaching role. And I decided, no, I'm not here to do what I know. I'm here to learn about, the effect of this new coaching technique I'm learning. And I said, I'll be the coachee, which was scary because I had a big event happen, not the neighbor, nothing to do with the neighbor. Another thing happened in our lives, in our family life, that I find to be very difficult to entangled. And I was beginning to talk about it, about how to navigate it. And my coach just said, okay, stop. And why don't you take a breath at the end of each sentence and see what happens? It's like, okay, here I am getting coached. And so I did. And what I saw was, this sort of wanting to make a difference part of me, this sort of angry at the system part of me, the mom part of me, all these different parts of me, so tangled, like like imagine a ball of yarn that's wound perfectly. It's not that, it's like the one that the cat gets and you sort of just bunch it all together and you can't pull it. And I was getting sort of this stopping, taking a breath and separating this piece and this piece and this piece. And my coach said to me, so funny, interesting that this is what we're talking about today, and that person knew nothing about it, is, how can you separate these pieces to live your purpose in ways that meet each separate piece that respects those pieces? I can't give details of the story because it's not my story to tell. But the main point was, it doesn't have to look the way I thought it should look. And when we stop and take a breath, we can pull things apart and see how everything is connected, and how we can just sort of say, that's this piece here. How does it impact these? And what would happen if I did that? Instead, I just went in with this sort of jumbled, honestly, anger. And why this matters for this conversation is, how do we express our purpose if we're sort of tangled up in sort of a mess of not being able to pull pieces apart. They're all connected, but pulling them apart to look at them separately, sort of. And that's kind of how I was sharing with you all, my team, one day on a rant. I have rants often. But how when I go on my walks, I have these insights about how the world is so messed up, and how can people actually believe this, and how can they believe that, and what the hell is wrong with these people? And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm the people. They think I'm the people, that they are the people. So today's coaching just helped me go, okay, let's break this apart. And what are the pieces? How can I approach each of the pieces that still are true to this purpose of mine? That's the connection I made. And yet not sort of encroaching on other people's autonomy. Does that make any sense? I don't know. I'm kind of rambling because it was a really big moment for me in the coaching conversation.
It does make sense. And I'm curious, I sort of have a question emerging for you from what you said, which is, so, both of us have kind of referenced either being in survival or being in crisis, or having something that we feel very angry or triggered by. So if that's something that people listening to us are experiencing, if they're experiencing this like frustration around the external circumstances of their life, which feels, I think, at time contrary to who we know ourselves to be and the purpose we want to express, what would your advice be for them?
Well, I can tell you in real time, take a breath between each thought, each sentence, and just like try to pull it apart and respect it's a system. But I think I would say I was confused about I must be a crusader, not only for my family, but for society. I must change this because it's so incredibly unfair. And the system. And that's like, okay, it becomes too big to solve, so one could go into resignation. Instead, what's a piece that I can pull apart and to just be present to right now? And then maybe that next piece will appear. I don't know if I'm getting off. I don't know if this is interesting to people out there in chat land. Let us know. But it's like, I think it's all connected to this sort of, we need to have a purpose. That back to one of our original podcasts of goals. Why set another goal? It's like what is the this word purpose meaning to how we do our life? Is it a fear driven? Is it, I don't know. Can anyone relate to this being driven by fear, and what Natalie said, driven by fear, and then sort of coming from a different place in it? That sort of breakthrough of same life, same purpose, but seeing it really differently from a place of allowing, maybe. And if we could put that back on ourselves, we would be more clear on our next step. I don't know. We need to dissect the recording of this one. I've gone off territory.
I think it's interesting. Because I think it's like, we talked about this. You gave a keynote the other day and you told a story of one of your coaching clients and we're relating it to values, and I love this triangle that I could picture in my head when you talked about it at the beginning of this call, where you were talking about purpose and values and goals and vision. And you were talking about your client and you said, wow, he said something to you like, wow, values are great to live by when life is going well.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's an interesting thing to consider, how do we be the fullest expression of ourselves as we walk through our life? Because life is sometimes wonderful, joyful, exciting, and hilarious, and other times a little bit sucky. I have another question for you, which is, I know that when we are in the leadership space, you often talk about leadership really being this balance of healthy self-interest and common good. And that was kind of coming up for me at the last part of your what you were sharing before about, I feel like I have to be a crusader. And there's an aspect of that to me that speaks to the common good. And then the question that I had going on in my head as you were saying it was something like, and how could you be a crusader for yourself in this moment? What would that look like? But I believe that we're all the leaders of our own life. So we say in our other life that we live in massively human leadership is a behavior, not a role, but we are all leaders because we are leaders of our own life. So do you think there's an intersection somewhere between this statement about a balance of healthy self-interest and common good in relationship to our purpose?
I think that's a good question. I'm obviously will just go with what comes to my mind and we might get somewhere. I do think that if we don't have we're humans after all, if we don't have some sort of self-interest in something, I'm not so sure we cannot have it. I've been in many meetings where people say, we check our egos at the door here. You don't freaking check your ego at the door. If you can do that, write a book, you'll be a billionaire. It's impossible. I see myself in this meeting. I notice myself getting hooked in. I notice myself biting the hook. I notice myself doing this, doing that. So that's the piece I don't think we can leave that healthy self-interest aside. And if in this situation I was to look at my self-interest in it, it's really to really to be the one that makes everything okay. I really want to be the one that makes everything okay. And what I want to do, I was asked specifically to not do. I mean, go there for a minute, right? And in the untangling, the taking a breath between each thought and each sentence, I was able to see, oh, this is the piece that anger or fear is coming from. And this is the piece where I could really impact change, the common good. But it's my self-motivation to be sort of like, I've got this, that I would need to look at. And being clear on the if we don't have healthy self-interest in it, it's not sustainable. If it's all about common good, it's not sustainable. And I like what Janice had to say. I don't see my purpose as fear-driven. I see it as what the legacy I'm here to leave. It has many, many iterations that can change over time. But everything I'm passionate about is about advocacy. Yeah, and Janice, thinking about that, because this is a piece that the advocacy piece for me is like, I could go into advocacy with anger, or just like, I wonder how all these people can believe all this shit in the world. Or I could say, I'm curious. Tell me more. Help me understand. That's common good. The advocacy piece sounds like common good for me. I'm speaking for me. It sounds really good, but it's driven by self-interest. So making the leap into what is common good, being more curious than afraid.
And I would say the self-interest piece for me is, how can you be an advocate for yourself while being an advocate for others? Yeah. Because I agree, we need advocacy in many aspects of life. It's a very important thing that happens. But when we push all of our energy out externally and we fail to become an advocate for ourselves, we end up with a very empty vessel, and then it becomes hard to give anything really at all. So yeah. I'm curious with regard to, because what I said to you before, Kathleen, I think my purpose, and I have a purpose statement, just to be transparent here. But I think my purpose sits somewhere between making a difference, happiness, and peace. And for me, I desire peace for myself and peace for others. And I desire to make a difference. And somewhere in that, I feel now more than ever at this stage of my development, conscientious about the balance that occurs between these things. Because I have had the experience of exhausting myself by making a difference. When we do that thing where we're like, okay, this is what I'm here to do, push all the energy out. And then suddenly you get to a place where you can't be in that expression of self, because you have neglected this, what I would describe as healthy self-interest, self-care, self-advocacy, all of these kinds of things.
That I was thinking about, I think it was Janice's comment earlier, the pull of what's more powerful, pull of vision or purpose, something to that effect. But it's like, we can allow our vision to pull us forward. But I think, and I didn't mean to use the word but, and our purpose of whatever, making a difference or whatever, we can keep in touch with, is that driven by self-interest? And acknowledging it, yeah. But also saying, okay, little shit disturber Kathleen, who wants to shake up the system, just like calm down for a minute, just like take a breath. If someone was to talk to you the way you're thinking about talking to someone else, would you respond? Yeah, I just want to hurt someone sometimes. That's true. Oh, okay. Get a piece of, hold on to that part of me it's part of me. It's part of all of us. And noticing it and saying, well, what could be the benefit of that? And is that getting me closer to this vision? Is this the purest expression of my purpose? or will it hinder my development, or will I become arrested in my development because I'm lashing out in this way? And had I not sort of taken a breath and kind of looked at the pieces, and there's so many pieces, I haven't looked at them all, but they were very entangled. And I think that's where we can get confused about the self-interest and the common good.
I'm so excited that you said this, because this is a total setup. So
Oh,
I just want to admit it before I do it.
oh,
But Kathleen, in this instance, could we use an aspirational value to fuel our purpose?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's how the values, the purpose. If you set goals, our visions, our missions, the how we do what we do, it's all, there's a thread through it all. And it's like, if I could tap into my value of compassion, I I could show up as an advocate, I could show up as a support, I could show up for myself, if I allow myself to just take a minute, and not be so entangled in it. And I think that when you're talking about the fear with your daughter and other things we go through, recognizing, oh, if I stop and breathe, I can find my way through in an expression of my purpose. And we only learn we can do that when we don't, when we mess it up and go, next time.
But I think this is a useful thing to talk to people about, because I think that this is one of those tools, very simple tools, that can pull us through when things get tricky. Because I would say I have an aspirational value of surrender, like to not argue with reality, to be in the flow of life. Like, it's aspirational. For me, there are certain areas of my life where I feel really surrendered, and parts of my life where I still feel this very strong desire to control. And my aspirational value of surrender comes from having been an extremely controlling person in different versions of myself as I have, walked through my own life experience. And I would say, in that situation with my daughter, it was something to cling on to. This value, this aspirational value of surrender, surrendering to what was, surrendering to the moment, and not trying to control. Because what was true actually in that situation was, when I tried to control, I made the situation worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So I think it's an interesting kind of highlighter moment to have people think about, when you are in those situations like the one you're describing, and you want to be an advocate. How could you not just your vision, but like, how could an aspirational value pull you forward too? Like, for you, compassion; for me, surrender. Curious to know what it might be for anyone else out there.
Yeah, a value to pull you forward.
Yeah.
And David says, what is fear? Since to me, all fear is an illusion, although in the moment it seems real. Love seems to be our purpose. Yeah, I love that, David. I do think love is our purpose. And it's the expression of how we manifest it, which is the journey, you know. And the healthy self-interest part is self-acceptance. The common good is the external expression of love or compassion or whatever word. But I like that.
And I would agree with you, David. I would say that fear is an illusion, but also it is an illusion that at times all of us are bought into. And so for me, looking at, for example, what we were just talking about, what's an aspirational value that can pull us forward in that moment when things are challenging, we're trying to live in our purpose and be who we are. Really, like Kathleen says, compassion, surrender, those are aspects of love. So we look to love to pull us through fear when we are believing in the illusion.
And kind of circling back to the start of this, just ease up if you don't have a clear purpose. Just like take your foot off the gas, take a beat, take a breath, notice sort of what things really bring you to life, and move towards that just a little bit more. And I don't know, it's like we must have clear purpose, or we must have, um, just the clarity of purpose. Sometimes I think maybe allowing it to reveal itself, just like that river, rather than telling the river where to go, where does it want to go? And and we're doing our best to not try to sort of guide it more to form and drop more into function. What is the energetic? What's the energy? And is this first impulsive action going to get you closer to or further from that which you seek? And I do think that being quiet, taking breaths, untangling everything, because everything's very connected. And we also, like, everything that we say or we teach in our classes, it's not going to suit everybody, right? Just take the pieces that work for you, the pieces that you needed to hear today, and carry those forward. Just like in my class was 2.5 hours, and it was a period of 5 minutes that really stuck with me the most. And just take what insights might work. Like Janice saying, a great reminder for me. Sometimes it does come from anger, frustration for me. Yeah. And reminding ourselves, it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be angry. And what value or could pull us through this experience in a way that enables our growth as opposed to our arresting our development.
I would say as well, because we have talked about fear as a motivator, developmentally or so on throughout this call, I don't know if I have a value judgment about that being bad or wrong. It's like I created a lot of external success through that motivator. And I learned more than that. I learned many, many, many valuable lessons. But I think that just listening to what Janice said on there is what got me here wasn't going to get me there. That's kind of what I figured out with the fear as a motivator. It's like I kind of exhausted the fear engine, and it was time for something new. So
I used to work in palliative care and hospice care that was sort of my early days of work in healthcare. And Kubler-Ross's stages of grief. Anger is a stage. It's a stage we go through with any loss. Just like with guilt, when we teach about guilt and resentment, guilt is useful. It's useful, and then until it's not. So the anger can ignite the spark, and then the breath and the slowing down can allow us to see what the next step is. Because I think when we see for me, I won't speak for everyone else here, but when I see injustice, or I see, someone being treated in a way that I think is wrong, because I am, the moral compass of the universe, in case you didn't know.
Thank God you're here.
Yeah, I know. Right? You're welcome. Is to calm down in it and to see, what is my part, and what is my part in the continuing on the part that's pissing me off, and then what could my part be in the moving towards a shift in it. And that doesn't generally coming from anger isn't a useful way, but it serves its function. I think it gets us fired up.
Maybe. Yes. And David said some version of that where he said, what is the anger and frustration saying to you? Yeah. He says, my suspicion that is where the lesson is. So as my wise friend Kathleen says, everything is good if we know what it's good for.
Times are good as long as we know what the times are good for. That's right. Sometimes it takes a little longer.
Yeah.
The most interesting discussion, kind of a windy road on this one, because just like we live in systems and there's multiple parts to things, I think purpose isn't a standalone concept. It's connected to so much in us and about us, and sort of the external manifestation of it, or even the pressure to have it, especially those of us in this transformation space. It's like this helping people find their purpose. I don't know. Maybe find peace. But as always, Natalie, I really learn a lot from your perspective, and I value it, and I really enjoy these conversations a lot. Like I look forward to this because we really don't prep in advance, and I hope those of you who consistently attend and those listening later enjoy these conversations, and we do enjoy the chat.
Yes, I will say thank you for everyone who shows up live, because you add so much richness to the discussion, and it's so interesting to hear other people's thoughts. And I echo everything you say, Kathleen. But I believe that is a wrap for today's episode of You Are Inevitable. Thank you for joining us on this journey of self-discovery and growth. As always, we would be super grateful if you liked, subscribed, and maybe even shared your thoughts with a review. And just to let you know, when we end this meeting in a minute here, which I'm sure Kathleen will have a few words before we do, that it takes you to a feedback form that's about 15 seconds long. So we'd love your thoughts if you have time to give them to us. And thanks so much, Kathleen, for having this platform for us to have these conversations, and for everyone who attends and listens.
Yeah, I appreciate you, and I look forward to whatever the next one is. We have a couple. I know we're doing a couple more before the end of June, and then we're all taking a little bit of team vacay through July, and see where we end up in August. But thanks, everybody, and we look forward to the next one in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the link for the feedback is there, and you'll get it when we shut her down as well. Betty Huntington, so good to see you virtually. Okay.